Streaming live on the ABC Listen app, on radio, and on your smart speaker. This is Susan Graham Ryan on ABC Queensland.
Text on 0487 993 222 or call 1300 630 222.
Good morning. Thanks for being with me today. Today on Mornings, we are celebrating International Day of People with Disability. This is a program that we've been working on for several months, firstly including Brendan Bernier. Good morning, Brendan.
Good morning, Susan.
Thanks for being with me today. You'll hear more of Brendan's interviews and conversations into the coming days and coming weeks. And it's great to have you with me as always, Brendan. Brendan with me across this week. Today's program's also being filmed and will be interpreted into Auslan and shared on our Facebook page later today. On the program today, we are tuned into inclusion, and you'll hear from a woman who, in a way, had a big part in making today happen in a pretty indirect way, but in a way altogether. More on that soon. Together, we'll also be hearing about a lifelong bond for an unexpected pair, and we'll find out about a project celebrating disability arts that's ahead on ABC Radio Queensland. Great to have you with me this morning. Fleetwood Mac, Rhiannon from 1975 there. It is 10 minutes past 9.
How has technology made it easy for broadcasters to perform their work, especially those who are blind or low vision? The ABC's Naz Campanella had to learn and adapt, as did those who work alongside of her. Susan and I spoke with Naz about what motivated her to become a broadcaster, along with the changes to technology that have come with it.
So I started in community radio like most of us radio heads do, and I think I was about 15 or 14. I hosted my own radio program, and it was a Thursday afternoon every week. I would leave school, and I was really excited because I got to miss out on Thursday afternoon sport, which I hated. And instead, I went off and basically was allowed to do community radio. And it involved my best friend and I. We hosted our own program, played music, had chats with people on the phone, and it was great. And I mean, I'd always wanted to be in radio, I think because I listened to it. It was sort of how I learned about the world around me growing up. And I loved the way people sounded, and I really loved music. And so doing community radio at such a young age really reaffirmed that it was something I wanted to do. And then I studied hard. I got into a journalism degree at the University of Technology, Sydney. And then after that, I did various casual writing roles with newspapers, but then ultimately got a cadetship at the ABC. And that was my sort of professional entry into radio. And here I am sort of 14, 15 years later.
What was the challenges you faced in, I guess, moving over from community radio to broadcasting with the ABC?
Well, community radio was, it felt small time, and it felt less intimidating, I guess, because, unless you did something really, really bad, there wasn't anything to lose. It was just a bit of fun, and I was really young, whereas getting into somewhere like the ABC, it was a professional career. It was something I wanted to do more than just well at. I wanted to excel at. And I've always had really big dreams of being not just a radio reporter, but a presenter as well, which thankfully I've been able to do. But then in addition, many of your listeners would know that I am blind. I've been blind since I was 6 months old. And, radio for me has been something that I've gravitated towards because it's obviously audio driven, but it can still be quite visual. The editing of audio is very visual. It's done on a screen. I've got screen reading software, which enables me to listen to what's on the screen. And I use various key combinations, or what we call keystrokes, on the computer to actually edit my work. But, some of the audio equipment and software is not accessible out there. So the ABC's thankfully found audio software that I am able to use independently. And then the studio desks can actually be quite visual. Some of them, particularly the more modern ones now, are very visual. They are touch screen. You can't actually feel the buttons. So I'm very grateful that over the years I've had people who have labeled the desks for me so that they've got tactile buttons and fuzzy little dots and things that I can feel, so I can actually navigate the desk myself. And then in addition to all of that is being able to panel the desks, or turn buttons on and off, but then also read news live to air. And I can explain that in a minute, but we had to develop a specific way for me to do that as well as a blind person.
It's always thinking of the solutions, which I love.
Yeah, it is. I'd always wanted to be a newsreader, for example, and that was something I expressed when I first started here at the ABC in 2011. And initially I was a reporter and would obviously go out on the road and file stories, and things have really evolved. I remember when I first started, I would write stories on my laptop and I had screen reading software. So as I typed, the screen reading software would read back into my little headphones that I would have in my ears what I had typed so I could listen. And I would actually have one earpiece in one ear, and then in the other ear I would have the phone, my mobile phone held up to my ear, and I would ring the studio and I would record my voice like on the phone, but in real time I'd have to call people. And I would listen to what I'd written through my voice technology, and I would repeat what I was hearing. But now technology's emerged and evolved so quickly that I actually have an app on my phone which I can actually, connect a microphone to, navigate to the software myself on my phone, and wherever I am, I can just record my voice, edit it, and send it back via email. And it can happen really quickly, so long as you have some decent Wi-Fi. And so, things have really changed. And I think the other thing is, with news reading, I said I wanted to do something. It took a long time. It took, putting a whole group of people together, tech experts, operations experts, and myself in a room, and we just came up with an innovative way for me to read the news, and that's how it's all happened.
And how has it been? Years ago, it used to be a bit of a problem with JAWS. You had to have two sound cards so that JAWS didn't come over the radio broadcast. How has that changed now?
Yeah, so the technology for context that you're referring to is the name of the speech software. It's called
That's
JAWS, and that is a little robotic voice that reads everything on, scans everything on the screen and reads it into my headphones. To be honest, I know how to use it from a usability perspective, but I don't know anything about the background of how the actual physical technology within kind of works. But I know that we just have various fancy magic leads and we connect them from my laptop to the desk, and it comes through my headphones and not out for everybody else to hear. And they and I am really grateful. That's a technical question, and that's for the tech experts.
But there was tech experts that had that can-do attitude towards it, and it's given you a career, and it's given Brendan inspiration and likely many others.
I think what I'd say is that there's always different ways to do something, and what it takes is getting the right people in the room. And I don't just mean the expertise, I mean the people who actually have a really positive attitude to thinking outside the square and to thinking that doomsday about how something's going to work, but it is going to work. And, we just have to find the tools to make it work. And I can tell you the system was absolutely not perfect when we first started. And if we'd waited for a perfect system, we never would have tried it at all. And I wouldn't be here now. But we practiced and practiced and practiced with a system we thought worked. And if I can just explain to your audience what that system is, basically I have a laptop, it's got the screen reading software, or JAWS, as Brendan pointed out, loaded onto it, and it scans all the stories that I've inputted into the bulletin on the screen, reads them into my headphones, and I listen and I repeat what I'm hearing. And in the background is not only that voice telling me what to read on air, but there's also a clock telling me when to start and when to finish, and what the time is. For example, when you're doing bulletins, they are specifically timed. if you're doing a longer show, you need to keep track of the time so that your interviews can time out, and we don't crash into the news. And then there's also myself coming through the microphone, so I can always hear that as well. And I can always hear the little snippets of music or grabs and little bits of audio that we play. So there's a lot going on in my headphones when I'm on air. But, that technology has enabled me to not only read news, for example, for Triple J, our biggest youth network in Australia for 7.5 years, but read bulletins on, ABC platforms across Radio National and all of our radio stations. But I've also been able to present programs, which has been wonderful. So longer form, a couple of hours worth of radio, do interviews, do emergency broadcasting, and that's been amazing.
That's the ABC's Naz Campanella. Thanks for being with us this morning for the Day of International Day with People with a Disability on ABC Radio Queensland.
Top entertainment's just a heartbeat.
It is 9:20 on ABC Radio Queensland, online and also on the ABC Listen app. Coming up, your Wednesday weather. That's just ahead. After that, your next news headlines. Then you'll hear about an unlikely regional Queensland duo who have found a fabulous friendship. Make sure you tune in to hear all about that. That's very shortly on ABC Radio Queensland. Billy Joel, A Matter of Trust from 1986. You're on ABC Radio Queensland. Susan Graham-Ryan with you this morning, joined by Brendan Bernier. We're celebrating International Day of People with Disability today. You'll hear amazing stories across this morning, and you'll also hear the weather. That's coming up in just 1 second. A lot of those heat waves have been cancelled that have been around the place, but still a very warm Queensland day. 35 degrees at the moment in Weipa, Normanton on 32, Longreach, Julia Creek and Cairns all on 31 degrees, Bowen on 30. 25 minutes past 9, and Daniel Hayes is with us from the Bureau of Meteorology this morning. Morning, Daniel.
Morning, Susan. Morning, Brendan.
Good morning.
Thanks for your time today. So that heatwave warning has now been cancelled for the state?
Yes, we don't really have any areas of warning at this stage. There's still a few small areas of low intensity heat wave, but we don't warn for those. So all the severe areas have eased off. We may see some more come back in as we head through the weekend. We do have a general warming trend pretty much for the rest of the week now. We'll see maximum temperatures edging back up, so we'll be pushing back up into some fairly widespread 40s through inland areas in particular over the weekend and early next week. And the minimum temperatures will follow those warming maximums. So a few areas maybe, again, by the weekend or early next week. For the time being, look, we've actually had a few cool starts to the morning around inland areas. We did see quite a number of centres getting down into the teens and even the low teens down in the southern parts around Charleville and so forth. That'll probably continue for another day or so, but as we see those maximums warm, the maximums today will largely be around about average for most of the state. We've had some below average through those inland areas for the last couple of days, but warming up now. And then as they continue to warm, we'll see those minimum temperatures coming back up to pretty close to average, really. Probably from around about Friday onwards, and also getting a bit above average by the end of the weekend.
And any action storm-wise, Daniel?
Yes, we've still got a fair bit of activity up over the peninsula areas. There's quite a bit of shower and thunderstorm activity showing around the northern parts of the peninsula and also around the North Tropical Coast. Now, at this stage, we did see some shower and storm activity down around Port Douglas sort of area earlier this morning. That's largely pushed offshore now. We've still got activity to the north of Cooktown. We are expecting to see showers tending to rain in the area from Port Douglas to Cooktown later today. And down around Innisfail, we'll see some increasing shower activity, potentially increasing to areas of rain. We've got a southerly surge pushing up the coast. It's helping to enhance that shower activity and build it to being a little bit heavier around that part of the coast. May see a few thunderstorms. Away from the coast, it's likely to be much more showery type activity up into the tablelands. Around Townsville and further south, it is going to continue to be pretty dry though.
What about the conditions on the waters?
Yeah, so look, the coastal waters, we've got a strong wind warning for the Townsville coast area today, winds up to 30 knots at times. On the Cairns coast, we get up to 25 knots at times in the offshore areas, and then to the south of Innisfail there, so closer to Townsville. Otherwise, generally where we're seeing those winds coming around to the east-southeast over the next few days, we do see some 15 to 20 knots in there, but it's really only that Townsville area that we've got warnings for.
And let's finish on a little forecast fly around if we can, starting in the far north.
So looking to hit 34 in Weipa, pretty much there already. Beyond that, 39 in Normanton, 34 for Townsville, 31 for Cairns, 38 for Mount Isa and Longreach today, 35 for Birdsville, and going for a top of 33 at Charleville.
Daniel Hayes from the Bureau, thanks so much for your time today.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Coming up on ABC Radio Queensland, going to meet a fabulous duo, perhaps an unlikely duo, as we continue the celebrations for International Day of People with Disability. You're going to hear from a gentleman who's been deaf for over 70 years, and he doesn't want you to feel sorry for him, of course. That's coming up very shortly on ABC Radio Queensland.
New from ABC.
It is coming up to 9:30. Time to find out what's making news headlines. Phil Brandell joins me. Good morning.
Good morning, Susan. Bruce Lerman has lost his appeal against a federal court ruling that found on the balance of probabilities he had raped his colleague Brittany Higgins in Parliament House in Canberra in 2019. That ruling came from a failed defamation case Mr Lerman launched against Network 10 and journalist Lisa Wilkinson. In the original judgment handed down last year, Justice Michael Lee found Mr Lerman and Miss Higgins did have sex, that Miss Higgins did not consent, and that Mr Lerman was indifferent about whether she had consented. Mr Lerman has consistently maintained his innocence. Queensland Police have broken up an alleged drug trafficking syndicate in the state's north. Operation X-Ray Ryle, launched in 2023, resulted in 4 arrests on 17 charges involving methamphetamine supply and money laundering. On November 20, officers seized 1.7 kilograms of the drug in Townsville and charged a 42-year-old woman who will appear in court in January. And a newly opened wind farm in central Queensland, backed by billionaire Andrew Forrest, is the latest renewable energy project to confirm it has asbestos in its turbines. The $1 billion Clark Creek wind farm between Rockhampton and Mackay is the third Australian wind farm to find white asbestos in lift brake pads. Supplier Godwin alerted authorities after a similar discovery in Tasmania. After a similar discovery in Tasmania. Squadron Energy says remediation is underway and there is no risk to workers or the community. And there'll be a full news update at 10 a.m.
Thank you very much for that, Phil. The heat wave is cancelled, but in some parts it probably doesn't feel like that today.
It's still very, very warm in large parts of Queensland. I think, it ticked over the 1st of December and bang.
Summer.
Here
you go. How are you dealing with the heat, Brendan?
Not too bad. It's definitely a little bit warm, but overall it's pretty good. It's just the humidity at times that gets to you.
Little bit different from Toowoomba. Toowoomba doesn't get too much humidity. High temps, but not so much humidity, right?
No, generally it's pretty good weather-wise.
Pretty good weather-wise.
Nice
and cool.
Brendan, have you felt snow?
Yes, I have. In New Zealand, and also went snow skiing in the United States.
Oh.
Tell us about snow skiing when you can't see.
It's an interesting exercise. Luckily, I had someone with me who'd done water skiing before, so they were able to explain to me some of the differences between water skiing and snow skiing. But yeah, it's very different. The feeling of the ice and skating along, it's a magnificent feeling.
Such an adventurer, Brendan. Thank you very much for that, Phil, for that news update. Phil will be back at 10:30. You are on ABC Radio Queensland. We're celebrating International Day of People with Disability, and coming up very shortly, you will hear from a fabulous duo, a beautiful friendship that's formed over many decades. You'll hear all about that very shortly on ABC Radio Queensland. Stay with us. Say I Love You from 1981. Thanks for your company this morning on ABC Radio Queensland, celebrating International Day of People with Disability. And our next guest is 78 years old, and he's done some interesting things and has some interesting stories to tell today. Ian Preston Stanley is from Townsville. He has been deaf since he was 2 years old and he doesn't consider himself as someone who has a disability. Ian is with me now. Good morning.
Good morning, Susan. I hope we have a good line.
We have a good enough line. Thank you very much for being with me and Brendan this morning. A lot has changed in your years on this earth, but would you share a little bit about with us about growing up deaf and the challenges you experienced at school?
Yes, well, of course, back in the late 40s, early 50s, the medical knowledge wasn't what it is now. My first set of hearing aids weighed about 2.5 kilos, worn around a belt on my waist either side, one microphone and one battery power, with a great big long cord up to my ears. Now I've got simple aids in each ear with Bluetooth connection.
Wow, it's changed a whole lot.
Most definitely, yes. Much simpler for me, not always easier for everyone else, but they have to learn to like it.
How are your experiences at school, Ian?
Most of the kids were pretty good. I had a couple of few bullies who couldn't understand the fact that I didn't understand them, and my speech over being a deaf person wasn't all that good. A lot of speech therapy, but terrific teachers who try to do whatever mum advised them to do. Mum used to come down and see the teachers at least once a week. But I had a good bunch of teachers growing up.
What changes to technology have made it easier for deaf people?
That's you, Brendan, is it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, good. Mainly the technology and the hearing aids. For years I could only wear one hearing aid, even though I was deaf in both ears. I used to tell my niece that I was deaf in one ear and couldn't hear out the other. She's lucky enough, my niece has got cochlear implant. Well, when I was 18, I volunteered with Graham Clark, who invented the cochlear implant, and he said he didn't want to ruin what I already had. He only wanted to work with profoundly deaf people. And then there's a contest between my niece and I as to who is the best reader.
For many people who are deaf, including yourself, so you don't consider yourself as having a disability. Tell me why that's so important as a distinction for us to understand.
I guess the main thing is that it's not a physical thing. You can't see a deaf person. Somebody who had polio and wore calipers, or someone like Brendan, who you can see that is blind. I haven't met Brendan, so I don't know what he uses as a visual aid. But yeah, that was the main thing, is that deafness is not a physically visible thing. I can relate to working with the owner of a copper mine back in the late 60s. His son was blind, and I was terribly worried about the way the young vessel would move around on the mine site, which was very primitive and certainly wouldn't pass any muster for workplace health and safety. And Father said, he'll look after himself. He can feel his way around. He's got that inbuilt aura where he could sort of sense something in front of him. And then the young fella turned around and said, "Oh, Dad, poor Ian, he's deaf." And of course, his hearing was terrific. Mine wasn't, and I felt sorry for him because he couldn't see physical objects and colours and the sky and that sort of thing.
And
I often wonder, I was wondering when I was listening to you yesterday whether um Brendan has developed any extra sensitive acuity.
oh, Brendan, do you have superpowers? Ian wants to know if you have superpowers.
I wouldn't describe them as superpowers, but
He's
yes, I
not
do.
wearing his cape today.
I do use echolocation from time to time, which helps me to get around, and I use landmarks and different sounds that I can hear with the cane, and those little bits and pieces help me get around for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, Brendan's the beneficiary of improved technology too.
Oh, definitely, it's improved so much.
Yeah.
Ian, do you have superpowers?
Only in my dreams.
So you've obviously created a very unique bond and friendship with the 10-year-old at that time back at the mine, which that's another thing that's changed a whole lot. So you became friends over the years.
Yeah, unfortunately, his father died, and then he lived most of his life in institutional care. So I haven't been able to keep in touch with him.
Oh. Well, maybe today we can hopefully create that bond. Maybe that person is listening today. We'll never know, but maybe. Uh, One of the key things that you want people to know, is that about not feeling sorry for people who might be blind or might be deaf.
Yes, yeah, there's no need to feel sorry for us. But maybe, just understanding that we are a little bit different, but we're the same.
So true.
One of my big problems is that I didn't realise until I was into my 40s that I spoke like a deaf person, which made it a bit harder for me to understand why people didn't understand me.
And
But when I'm talking, which I probably tend to shout, I talk the same as you and anyone else.
absolutely. What would you like people to take away from today, Ian?
Good question. I don't know if I've got a really good answer.
Is it about respect and not making assumptions?
Yeah. If you think you can help, well and good, but if you can't, well, just don't be upset.
And Ian, do you remember the name of this 10-year-old that you had that special bond with, that potentially we could reconnect you with today?
No, his father was special. Can't remember the young fella's name. Gee, that's going back 60 years. It's more. 50 years ago.
But there was an understanding and a real respect and care for one another there. So it's been lovely to hear about that connection. Ian Preston Stanley from Townsville, thanks for your time today and for sharing the story of your young friendship, and maybe we can reunite you today. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you for good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You are on ABC Radio Queensland. That was Ian, and what a great story about people looking out for one another. That's what it's all about, right? And having that lovely understanding and respect. It is International Day of People with Disability today, and the next we're going to be talking about art. Art has an important part in our world. It's been a part of cultures for tens of thousands of years. There's a new project which has just really got underway, and it's got a really important and heartening connection to International Day of People with Disability. You'll hear all about that very shortly. After that, your 10 o'clock ABC News, less than 15 minutes away. Chicago, Saturday in the Park from 1972. 10 minutes until your 10 o'clock ABC News. I am someone who very much enjoys art, creating it and experiencing it, the feeling of expression and freedom, mindfulness, understanding, learning, and so much more. Art has played a really important part of cultures across tens of thousands of years. Professor Bree Hadley is a researcher and arts leader with the Queensland University of Technology and is with us now. Good morning.
Good morning.
So what, firstly, does inclusion mean to you, Bree?
Inclusion means everybody gets to take part, and everybody gets to take part in a way that works for them and in a way that they get to express themselves and their own story in their own modality that's meaningful to them.
So share with me about this National Archive that you've been part of establishing.
So it's a conversation we've been having we worked out at least a decade through past projects that we've done. So it's quite a large group of us that have come together on the project, and we've been talking about, it's been since at least the 1970s that artists and allies have been working together to make arts and media, by which I mean theatre, dance, visual arts, music, all sorts of art forms, more accessible for people who are deaf, disabled people, people who are neurodivergent in one way or another, even though that's a more modern word that we use. But we don't have the memories. Those things are held in boxes in people's garages. They've been donated to state libraries. They're kept in organisations. So it feels like for young people starting now today, they don't have access to this history of great work. For people who've done the work, they don't have an easy way to share it. So quite a lot of us have been talking since 2015 that we need to find a way to do it. We finally were able to get some support from Creative Australia and also the Australian Research Council to go around and start collecting some of these wonderful histories of work that people have been doing all around Australia.
How many artists are involved in the project?
So we're not saying it's a comprehensive archive for a number of reasons. What's been held, what's been collected. There's 8,000 names of people who've been involved that have been entered into this database. Going back to, in fact, the 1960s, a lot of strong kind of uptick from the 70s forward across all sorts of different art forms. And we've worked with a steering committee and also co-design workshops with artists about how we should design the site, with over 100 artists from all different states across Australia about what should be included and how should we include it, given so much has changed about how we make art and talk about it over the period of time we're talking about.
Are you hoping to continue to expand this or build even further back in history?
We'd love to continue to expand it, and I think so when we talk to people in the arts community and the disability arts community, people want to expand it to cover more and more of the present work, and people are very keen to connect with others making work in the art form that they're aligned with. But a lot of people do very interdisciplinary work and are very keen to connect with each other. We're also interested in going back historically is the big challenge, and finding what has and hasn't been recorded. A lot of the work that artists and allies have done going back into the 70s and prior, it's taken place in hospitals, in schools, in community centres, and it hasn't been recorded in the same ways. It hasn't been collected in mainstream institutions. What's fascinating about doing this project is we've seen that started to change, and we love seeing the stories of how people have advocated for change over time. It's really challenging work to find it, and then also to think about how we share it, who gives permission to share it for things that are going back in time. So it's more challenging to do the historical work, but we'd love to do that too.
And what responses have you had to the project?
So as you can imagine, people have identified more and more contemporary work particularly. People have identified more stories. So we've got artists, we've got examples of work, we've got documents, but we've also got a timeline that people can click on arts practice or arts policy in a particular period of time, and people are bringing up their own memories of things that have happened in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s that they see as key turning points. And I think people find that timeline a real favourite. It sort of puts things in context of this was happening in arts or in media or in film representations at the same time something was happening in politics or in sport or in government, that things came together and there was a particular synergy that was meaningful that people all recollect and want to have that marked and observed for someone who comes back in 10 years, 50 years, 100 years, so that it's not invisible to future generations who might look back on us now.
How can people find and explore this Disability Arts History Australia project?
So if people put Disability Arts History Australia.net into any search engine, it should come up, or just search those words. It has been, and we had some IT experts help us as well, of course, coming up first in the Google searches. And then once people are there, it's got all the videos have Auslan interpretation and captions and things like that. And so we've done what we can to make it as accessible as possible and put on filters and things that people can hit Queensland, for example, or they can hit film, for example, to start taking them through stories of particular areas or art forms that they may be interested in once they're there.
What's next from here, Bree?
I think the other thing that people are quite interested in is learning from the past to help build towards a more inclusive future. So we learn a lot about the artists that have done work and the strategies that they have tried, and you can see that people have used things that have been more or less successful that they would like to feed in going forward. So one of the things today on International Day for People with Disabilities that we talk about is how can we make a world that's more inclusive for everyone in the future? And people have learnings that we can take all the learnings that we see in all the different things gathered in a website like this and make some recommendations about how we do education, how we do training, how we do workplaces and employments that can be picked up and used by everyone to make a better future for all of us. And I think that's something positive people want to see as learnings coming out, as well as just enjoying the materials that are shared.
Professor Bree Hadley, researcher and arts leader with Queensland University of Technology, thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you. You are on ABC Radio Queensland. Nearly time for your 10 o'clock ABC News. Weddings, partings, anything, Monday's experts. You're on ABC Radio Queensland. It's nearly time for your 10 o'clock ABC News. After that, what's in your emergency kit, and is everyone and everything thought of? And a whole lot more. Stay with me.
You're listening to ABC Queensland.
This is Susan Graham Ryan.
Associate Professor Michelle Villeneuve is at the Centre for Disability Research and Policy with the University of Sydney and is with us now. Good morning.
Good morning.
So when we think about disaster preparedness, are people with disability considered by disaster managers in that community planning process?
Well, Susan, I think that's an excellent question, and I'm really pleased to say that today in 2025, people with disability are far more on the radar in Australia when it comes to inclusion and disability inclusive emergency planning, planning to respond, and also in the recovery processes following disaster. And that's actually the result of a significant amount of work over the past decade plus. Of working in partnership with people with disability, the services that support them, governments and emergency personnel, all working together to right that past exclusion of people with disability from disaster risk reduction planning and practice.
Are there responses to planning that may have some gaps?
There are definitely gaps in our planning and challenges to how to get access to information. So one of the biggest things I think that was mentioned in your intro really is that all of our plans will actually vary depending on where we live, what our local disaster risks are, how we manage ourselves every day, how we give, receive support from other people. And the availability of those supports and resources on any given day. When those things become compromised in a disaster, that can make it even more challenging for people. So one of the biggest gaps we need to fill, I suppose, is making sure we understand that fact, that we can engage in a sort of a self-assessment process, if you will, of how ready we are, how prepared we are, what do we need, how do we manage ourselves every day, and how can we address any gaps we might have or challenges we might experience in emergency situations. Now, for people with disability, we have some tools to help that to happen, the Person-Centered Emergency Preparedness Toolkit in particular. But I think it's really important to recognize that people shouldn't prepare alone. People need to prepare with other people. We all need to consider how our plans interact with our friends, our family, our local networks especially, but also for people who receive supports and services from others. They need to make sure they talk about their plans and think about what services are going to be available or potentially compromised and what they can expect during an emergency situation. So I guess if your listeners out there are thinking about what's the number one thing they can do is start actually thinking about what their risks are and talking with the people in their support networks to start identifying and addressing some gaps.
Should there be a greater emphasis of people with disability holding places around that disaster management table, so to speak?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges we experience across Australia is that our emergency sector typically plans to respond to emergencies. And then, of course, that typically involves all those functional areas of emergency management that are dealing with power, and our infrastructure and writing all of the things that we need functioning in our communities again. But in that process, people with support needs have not really been part of that conversation and at the table as part of the planning. And I think it's a challenge for the emergency sector as well. When we plan to respond, it means that we aren't pre-planning for how people, every one of us, disabled or not, can actually take our role and responsibility for having plans in place, learning about and understanding how our emergency management arrangements operate in Australia. So we know what to expect, and so we can take part in that planning. I think when emergency services don't have people with disability at the table, they can make assumptions about what people need or, in fact, overlook people entirely, and that can leave people with disability behind when disasters do strike.
There's a new toolkit for emergency preparedness for people with disabilities. Tell me about that.
Yeah, last year, actually, on International Day of Persons with Disability in 2024, we actually launched with the National Emergency Management Agency the Disability Inclusive Emergency Management Toolkit. It's a really exciting thing because the emphasis of this toolkit is on standards of practice that the emergency sector can follow to make sure that people with disability are included, that they're forming strategic partnerships with disability advocates and representatives, as well as supporting services, and that they can start to plan for more accessible resourcing and supports that people need before, during, and after disasters. And so this toolkit has been in the works, getting into practice over the last year, and we have been traveling across Australia, working with local governments and local communities to raise awareness about the toolkit. In fact, today will be our 50th Disability Inclusive Emergency Planning Forum, reaching across all of Australia to raise awareness about this toolkit and get it in the hands of emergency personnel so that they know how they can better include people with disability in the work that they do.
When we think of these times, preparedness is so important, but also when we're in the midst of it is also really important because I guess planning leads to outcomes in many cases. We saw this year in North Queensland and many different areas around Queensland that there were areas that were flooded or impacted by disaster for extended periods of time. That meant that they were out of their homes and oftentimes out of communication for long periods of time. For mainstream population, that's a huge challenge. But what impacts can that have short and longer term for perhaps people with a disability?
Yeah, it can be quite significant. So if you think of people with disability who rely on other people for support, for example, when we have significant flooding, they may be separated from the services that they rely on and left to manage themselves. That can be very difficult if you rely on other people for your self-care, for your mobility, perhaps for your feeding or for some medical and health essentials in your life. So that can be compounded, in fact, by separation from communication from people. What we've heard over the years from people with lived experience of disability when these disaster events happen and when they feel most left behind is when nobody has reached out and contacted them. Nobody has reached in and said, "Are you okay?" or come to check on them. That's a really overwhelming theme in our research program. And one thing that I would love to raise awareness about with the general public, with individuals themselves, and perhaps even family carers of people with disability, if we could all take some time to sort of pause and think who's in our community, who lives in our neighborhood, who may have additional support needs, and to actually be thinking about how we might incorporate them and their plans into our own emergency preparedness plans. As you said, in the thick of it, people get quite, concerned with their own safety, and it's really important for us to stop for a moment and think about the people next to us in our homes and communities who may need additional supports from us.
What other changes would you like to see in this space?
I think what I'd like to see is everybody having a personal emergency preparedness plan. I think generally the public thinks that, or waits too long, I suppose, before they think about making an emergency plan. And waiting until the point of an emergency is really too late. At that point, you can't think straight about what you need. And if you have additional support needs, you actually have to negotiate quite a bit of your preparedness plan in partnership with other people. So what I'd really like to see is individuals making those plans themselves and communicating with others about what their support needs are. I think service providers can play a really significant role here. If you think about in your community, the wide range of services that you might interact with, or if you have a lived experience of disability, the service providers you might interact with on a routine or irregular basis. When you have those interactions, raise the conversation about emergency planning and ask those organizations what plans do they have in place to continue the services and supports that you rely on. I think we need to make sure that we're not in this alone and we actually reach out to those services that we rely on to think about, well, what are your plans and how might that affect me? And those actions are going to also really help and support our governments and emergency agencies who are making community level plans, because the more they can learn about our individual and organizational readiness, the more they can make sure that they're addressing some of the structural barriers that people are going to experience in the event of a disaster in your community.
And just quickly, Michelle, is there a resource that you would like to point people to make sure that they are planning that independent plan? What are some of the resources you'd like to put people through to?
Well, if people want, they can travel to collaborating for inclusion.org. If you visit our website, what we have there is several resources. So whether you have lived experience of disability, you care for someone with a disability, you're a service provider, or you work in government and emergency services, there is something there for you to help you personally make your plan and also help you support others to plan and prepare. You can travel to the new DM toolkit that's on our website, but you can also go to the person-centered emergency preparedness page. What is, I think, really great about that site is people can start where they like, watch a video, read an infographic, download a toolkit, and start where they would like to. And what they will find when they visit Collaborating for Inclusion is that they will begin to interact with experts of all kinds, people with lived experience of disability who are experts in their everyday life, emergency managers who know about local risks and actions you can take, and service providers and the work that they're doing to advance service and business continuity plans. So I'd really encourage people, it's sort of a one-stop shop where you can go for all the information that you need, and that site will then link you to other people and resources and tools outside of our website.
Associate Professor Michelle Villeneuve at the Centre for Disability Research and Policy at the University of Sydney. Thanks for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Coming up to 20 past 10 on ABC Radio Queensland, we're celebrating International Day of People with Disability. Thanks for being with us today and thanks for joining us. If you are tuning in on the video later today, which will be interpreted into Auslan, thanks for being with us. And we will be chatting more in just a few moments with Brett Casey, the CEO of Deaf Connect, about some of the things that he would like to raise as concerns and gaps in how things are done, especially in relation to the NDIS. Do stay with us on ABC Radio Queensland.
That was Wanna Be Up by the Shantuzis from 1988. You're on ABC Radio Queensland.
Well, as I mentioned at the top of the program, today's program is being filmed and is being interpreted into Auslan and will be shared on the ABC Facebook pages later today. The NDIS has been transformational for many people and their families, but a decade on, many will also admit there is a long way to go and still a lot of knowledge and understanding gaps in the service, including staff members calling participants who are deaf to try to book appointments. Brett Casey is the CEO of Deaf Connect. Brett is deaf. And Brendan and I spoke with Brett through his Auslan interpreter, Duke. I started off by asking Brett what inclusivity means to him.
Being able to belong. We have a vibrant community. It's ensuring that we have a good life, and that may be through accessing services to provide that. And as a community, we do have a unique culture and identity with shared history and language. But what is most important with inclusivity is that sense of belonging. We want the mainstream community to understand that the deaf community is there not to exclude us, to include us as part of the wider society. And I spoke to services, whether it's government or private or through a non-for-profit. We're here to ensure that deaf people get access to the various services they need. Access does equal inclusion, but it's also access that's not happening in the community that we want to highlight.
Can you talk us through some of those areas that you mean?
So when we speak to access, I'm talking to the sign language using community. We communicate through our hands. In most part, we have access to interpreters that you would have seen during press conferences, natural disasters, especially in far north Queensland, where you experience a lot more natural disasters than the rest of the state. I've noticed the mainstream community is starting to associate interpreters with bad news, and the deaf community to an extent as well. If they see an interpreter on TV, they'll have to stop and watch because it's bad news. And we're not celebrating the good stuff as a community. Like the announcement of the 2032 Olympic Games, we didn't provide an interpreter for that announcement, and things across the Australian landscape where it's just as important for as a community to be aware of than just in events of disaster. And so having access and inclusion across good and bad. Again, to reiterate, having inclusion as all part of everyday life and not just during disasters. The International Day of Disabilities is a chance to showcase what inclusion looks like and to include the deaf community into your program on Wednesday. And it's a great outcome for our community to share the good news and access to the good news. Providing that access ensures a good life for anyone that receives that access.
And how is the NDIS helping, for example, to enable deaf people to be able to communicate with their family members? For example, at family functions, I'd imagine having interpreters there would make it a lot easier for instances like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. That is correct. And I would agree with that point. 95% of deaf people are born into hearing families, so they're the first deaf people in that family, and they don't have any models or role models to go against. And so communication is definitely difficult in that family environment. And we have tutoring and mentoring available, but deaf people with NDIS plans like myself are now able to utilise that plan to access family events and family functions. Recently, we had a family meeting with my ageing parents to talk about their wishes as they're ageing. And I had an opportunity to bring an interpreter to actually have a proper conversation with my siblings and family present. And that's really impactful, which I wasn't awarded that opportunity in the past, previous to NDIS. And so I now can access to the wider family, talk to my cousins and aunties and uncles, and it's a great thing. As I said before, with my two sons playing soccer and other sports growing up, now I can have interpreters available for those events and talk to the parents of their friends and engage in wider society and be actually part of their schooling and part of their sporting. So the NDIS is a game changer in that aspect, especially accessing interpreters. And that's predominantly the largest service a deaf person will access within the NDIS is interpreting services and to increase their social engagement.
And how does the organisation that you belong to, Deaf Connect, how does it help to enable people to shift attitudes towards deaf people, to be more inclusive of them and not just perhaps make stereotypes?
As a service provider, we do provide a number of different services for our community, which does include interpreting. But one thing that happens time and time again, you spoke to community attitudes and perception and stereotypes and how to shift that attitude. We have deaf awareness training that is available as a service, and we provide that to many organisations and government where it's cultural and linguistic training to ensure they change their attitude of deafness and seeing deafness as a positive and a positive outcome to your environment if you include deaf people more in the workplace, etc. And so that's one way where we change community perception is through that deaf awareness training, where they meet a deaf trainer and be able to ask those questions. We also have social media campaigns during National Week of Deaf People and Auslan Day, days where we celebrate our community and the positive impacts including our community can bring to dispel some of those myths or biases. As I said before, 95% of deaf people are born into mainstream families, into hearing families. And a lot of these people work in workplaces with hearing colleagues, and so learning sign language, just a quick 8-week course, is so powerful in terms of engaging your colleague and including your colleague into the workforce. And so we are offering those opportunities as a service provider. We like to think that Deaf Connect is a conduit to support others and to link the deaf community into the mainstream and the mainstream to the deaf community through our sign language classes, through deaf awareness training, through our social media campaigns, or varying workshops we're able to provide for the community. There's a lot of activities that we can do to try and shift that mindset and that attitude.
What does the NDIS need to do better?
Actually, I have a meeting with the NDIA this week in Geelong, the day after this program. I hope they listen to this program on Wednesday. And how they can improve is providing a better way for the deaf community to access the scheme. Brendan may agree with me. Each disability has their own way of doing things. And so for the NDIA, they will call you to organise your interview. And if you fail on the third phone call, they'll kick you off the list. But you can't call a deaf person. And they're still calling deaf people. And so that's an automatic barrier that is set in place by that process. And so being flexible and agile and culturally appropriate and linguistically appropriate to the types of disabilities, that's how they can improve. I think the NDIS staff also need more awareness on deafness and some of the issues that we face. Some people equate deafness to having to learn how to speak or wear hearing aids and not acknowledging or celebrating sign language. And so more deaf awareness will help in that aspect. I think every disability will also probably say a similar improvement in terms of awareness.
Brett, last time we spoke, following the program, somebody sent a text through saying they wished that Auslan was taught more in schools rather than languages other than English, or as part of that program. Would you be in support of that?
I do, yes. But it then leads to a further issue. I think Victoria, Western Australia have rolled out Auslan as a LOTE in school, as a LOTE option in schools. And they've contacted Deaf Connect to provide those tutors in those arrangements. But at the same time, as we roll out Auslan as a LOTE, Deaf Connect as a philosophy uses native users of Auslan to teach the language. We don't use people who have learnt Auslan through a course to teach the language. We use deaf people who grew up with the language to teach the language. And in schools, we see often teachers learn sign language, they do one class and then teach the lot, and that's not the appropriate situation. We want to see deaf people empowered to remain in control of their language and to teach the language in the appropriate way with that cultural and linguistic sensitivity.
That was Brett Casey, CEO of Deaf Connect. You're listening to ABC Radio Queensland, live on the ABC Listen app and online. Now it's time for the news headlines.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, Brendan. Bruce Lerman has lost his appeal against the federal court ruling that found on the balance of probabilities he had raped his colleague Brittany Higgins at Parliament House in Canberra in 2019. That ruling came from a failed defamation case Mr Lerman launched against Network 10 and journalist Lisa Wilkinson. In the original judgment handed down last year, Justice Michael Lee found Mr Lerman and Miss Higgins did have sex, that Miss Higgins did not consent, and Mr Lerman was indifferent to whether she had consented. Mr Lerman has consistently maintained his innocence. A high-ranking union official will today continue giving evidence at a Queensland Commission of Inquiry into the state branch of the CFMEU. The inquiry was focused heavily on the CFMEU's alleged use of violence and intimidation towards its main rival, the Australian Workers' Union, to gain control of civil construction sites. Queensland Council of Unions General Secretary Jacqueline King appeared at yesterday's hearing and is due to continue giving her evidence today. And police are investigating a workplace incident in southwest Queensland. Emergency services were called to a business on the Warrego Highway in Roma just before 7 o'clock this morning. Paramedics say they received reports a bay of hail fell on a woman and she suffered life-threatening injuries. And there'll be a full news update at 11.
Thank you very much for that update, Phil Brandell. Coming up very shortly on ABC Radio Queensland as we continue to celebrate International Day of People with Disability. It's very likely that you and a lot of people you know have benefited by something that has changed over time to improve access and inclusivity. Sometimes these tweaks or changes you might even consider as a modern convenience, but maybe they did come about initially because of need. Ahead this morning, I'll have someone with me who might just have some answers to some of your questions. Perhaps you would like to make your business or organisation more accessible. Maybe you'd like to know the best way to ask if someone needs support. Or maybe it's something else. If you've got a question this morning, 1300 630 222 or text on 0487 993 222. Those numbers again, 1300 630 222. Give us a call or you can text on 0487 993 222. This is ABC Radio Queensland. John Mayer, No Such Thing, from 1999. You're on ABC Radio Queensland. Today we're celebrating International Day of People with Disability. And this morning, as the saying goes, necessity is the mother of invention is something that I relate to a lot in my family. As many of you will know that I have a brother named Joel. He lives in Toowoomba. He had a brain injury as a toddler. And over the years and the decades, my mum, I also use the word MacGyvered a lot. My mum MacGyvered tools and strategies to help him to be comfortable, to support his communication, to reduce risks for him. And that still continues even to this day. And it's a constant reminder to me about some of the modern changes that we see in life to make us all safer and to accommodate more people. And today you also have a chance to ask some questions. You can call through and join in the conversation, 1300 630 222, or you can text through 0487 993 222. Perhaps you would like to make your business or organisation more accessible. Maybe you'd like your team to do some training. Maybe you'd like to know the best way to ask appropriately if someone needs some support. Well, Megan Spindler-Smith is the acting CEO of People with Disability Australia, and they're with me now. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good, thank you very much. Thanks for joining Brendan and myself this morning, and I'm pleased that you're happy to take some listener questions if they have them this morning. While we're waiting for people to give a buzz through, what does inclusivity mean to you, Megan?
Look, inclusivity means to me that we create a space where everyone in our community, every person with disability especially, can be included, can be part of the community in any way that is right for them. And that's the most important part. It's about what's right for what we need and not necessarily what someone else decides for us.
Brendan, what about for you? What does inclusivity mean to you?
I think for me, it means the ability to be included, and it encompasses all sorts of different things. For example, being able to navigate your way around different areas and also to be able to participate fully in the communities that you're in.
Yeah. And inclusivity means a lot to a lot of people, and it'll mean different things in different ways to different people. If you've got a question today, please do call through 1300 630 222. The lines are open, and you can also text through 0487 993 222. Jay from Tully has asked the question, how can I respectfully ask somebody with a disability whether they may need my help? Megan, would you like to answer that first?
Yeah, look, I would love to. I think the simplest way is, hey, do you need anything? Can I support you? Or even just noting to say, I can see you're having, not being able to get to that. Is there anything I could do to support with that?
Would you agree, Brendan?
Yeah, I would. I mean, sometimes we do try to navigate our way around, and sometimes we can get lost, but other times, if people give us a hand, it can be very, very helpful.
And one of the things that I was mentioning earlier is that a lot of the modifications and some of the innovations that we have and that a wider community enjoy have come out of necessity to improve access initially often. That might be things like footpaths, for example. Megan, can you talk with me about some of those modifications that we all might enjoy that have come through by access?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's my favourite concept. It's called the curb cut effect. And ostensibly, it came from those little cuts in pathways that can get you from a lower area to a slightly higher area, usually from the road up onto the pathway. And that was originally designed so that people who were wheelchair users or people like myself who are mobility aid users were able to easily move without having to go up steps. However, what we have seen is that it's now also useful for people delivering stock on trolleys, parents with prams, travellers with luggage, even cyclists. Everyone finds the use for it. So it was a little innovation for people with disability that has had a huge impact on how we move around our cities, even unnoticed a lot of the time.
We couldn't imagine life without it now.
Absolutely not. And it's simple things like that, but also things like being able to provide information in plain language or in easy read. It's not just useful for people with intellectual or cognitive disability, but it's actually really helpful for people who speak English as a second language, or even people who are just skimming information quickly and wanting to get access to that information as quickly as possible.
Brendan, what are some of the examples of these tools that have been created for access that yourself enjoy, but then the wider population enjoy? What are some of the examples?
Well, for example, a lot of people use a mobile phone, and a lot of those phones are iPhones, and iPhones have a feature on it called Siri, and Siri helps to be able to send text messages to people, play podcasts, and to help perform a variety of different tasks.
Yeah, there's lots of different options here. 1300 630 222. That's the number if you would like to call. 1300 630 222, or text on 0487 993 222. Another big one, I think, is in the spirit of voice assistance, as you mentioned, Brendan, is audiobooks. You'd like to partake in audiobooks?
Yeah, they're a great tool for being able to learn, study, and also find out about what's going on in the world. And it's magnificent to hear people narrate books for you. I mean, I did learn Braille as a child and still read a tiny bit, but audiobooks make it so much easier.
Megan, are there some other examples of things that people might not necessarily realise came about by access?
Look, absolutely. So things like the ability to have something read information off a screen. So you might want to be able to access a website and get information off that website and have it read to you through your Word or through your website or through anything else like that. That actually came from screen readers and from making sure that things were what's called WCAG, which is a great word. I just like saying it most of the time, but it's about those website accessibility standards that not only are useful for screen readers, but it's also actually something that has improved user experience and search engine results. So it means that when you're Googling something or looking something up on a search engine, it's actually easier to find, and they come from those accessibility standards.
There are a lot more, and I'm going to read out a list of some more in a second. But if you do have a question, whether it is about something that has become a mod con that started out from a point of access, you can call through 1300 630 222 or text through on 0487 993 222. Some things might be about some of those grips that you use in the kitchen, electric toothbrushes, elevators and lifts, high contrast signage so that you can read it as best as possible and more people can read it as best as possible. Even things like automatic door openers, which a lot of us, the shorter of us, struggle with still, but they're very helpful in many situations, whether that be that you've got a trolley or a stroller, or perhaps you are a wheelchair user. Megan, lots and lots of examples, aren't there?
There are, and I think this is the thing, is that the accessibility aspect of it is something that helps improve what we do in society and how we go about things. And it also means that we are, as people with disability, not just contributing to society, but we're actually making sure that there are innovations that you may not even notice, like the divots or the wayfinding paths or bumps on the roads that can be really useful if you are attempting to find your way. They were originally designed for people who are blind or have low vision to be able to navigate if they're using a stick or something else. So there are different things that we use for multiple opportunities.
It is great to see, and I'm going to give you that number once again if you've got a question for Michelle or for Brendan, 1300 630 222 or text on 0487 993 222. This is a question that perhaps both of you can answer. Michelle from Atherton has asked, as a cafe owner, how can I make my cafe more accessible when I have chairs and tables over the cafe? And also, what can we do menu-wise for people who may have sight issues? Brendan, would you like to start?
I guess it depends on the layout of the building. I mean, the more simple the layout of the building, the better. But in terms of the menu, well, there are pieces of technology that may not always, but can help with menu reading. For example, there's an app that people can get called Seeing AI. Now, it does require the user to be relatively au fait with using a camera, and that's a little bit tricky in my department because I've never really had to use a camera before. But if you've got the phone in the right position, it can read to you different documents, potentially including menu items.
What about for yourself, Megan? What would you say to Michelle as a starting point, perhaps?
Look, probably one of the first things that I would say is have a look at what is possible. So is it that it's you've got only really stairs as a way to get into your space? If that's the case, look at maybe a cost-effective option like a temporary ramp that can be brought in and out, that can be notified, or that there's a button that someone could press. When it comes to things like making spaces more accessible, ensure that you have the ability to move chairs out of the way if that is what you need for somebody who is a wheelchair user. but also think about sensory safety as well. So creating spaces that there is low sound or lower lights, or areas within the cafe that aren't as overwhelming from a smell or sight or sound perspective, can be really helpful for those with non-apparent or hidden disabilities that might be wearing sunflower lanyards. And probably one of the other things I would always recommend is be transparent, put it on your website, say what you do and don't have, because then people are able to go, okay, I know what's available to me, and it's not a shock when you get there, and what you need to access is either available or not available.
Hearing from Megan Spindler-Smith, the acting CEO of People with Disability Australia, and also for Brendan, from Brendan Bernier, who's answering your questions today. If you've got one, 1300 630 222. I want to talk about employment, where people with a disability make up around 20% of the Australian population. Many employers, I hear, talking constantly about challenges of getting and retaining staff, yet might be hesitant or averse to hiring people with disability because they're concerned about saying the wrong thing or those sorts of things. How can employers better consider the skills pool and include more people with disability?
Megan here. One of the things that I would suggest and I would really consider is, when it comes to hiring people with disability, it is really about thinking about what do you need and what are the skills that you actually need. So things like, do you actually need for the person to have a driver's license if they're not going to be doing any driving? Do you actually need to have them in the office all the time, or is there some flexibility? What are the must-haves and what are the things that can be more flexible as a starting point? But also what we do know is that when you bring people with disability into your organisation, the research is starting to show that it actually increases safety, reduces workplace health and safety incidences, and there is research showing that it actually reduces it up to by about 30%, because of the fact that you're making conscious decisions around creating not only a physically safe organisation, but a psychologically safe organisation. The other thing is there is so much amazing disability affirming training out there that can be given by organisations, obviously I'm going to say like ours, PWDA, but by organisations that are disability led, that can really help you understand and review your processes so that the staff are creating a safe space for people with disability to be just become part of the work community.
Brendan, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I would add, don't be perturbed, because people have their strengths and abilities that they can bring to the job, and sometimes they might not know exactly what they're doing to begin with, but as Winston Churchill once said, give us the tools and we'll finish the job.
A great comment there. We got another message. We were talking earlier about the cafe situation. Joe from Clifton Beach has sent through a text saying, turn the background music down. My mum has low hearing. I think cafes and restaurants have their music too loud for conversation, and also suggested large print on menus. So easy and so cheap. Joe, that's a fantastic point. I relate to that as well. What do you think about that, Brendan?
It certainly can help those who have a little bit more sight than others, definitely.
Do you have anything to add to that, Megan?
Look, I'm always going to agree with turning some of that background music down. As somebody with a disability that has sensory support needs as well, it is something that is so important because it can become so overwhelming, and I can't have a conversation because I can't differentiate between the voice of the person I'm talking to and the music or the sounds around me.
Are there any tips available freely online or available online for businesses, and where they can read more about accessibility, or people that they can consult to help with that accessibility piece, whether that be for staff or layouts and things like that, or even schools?
Look, absolutely. There are plenty of those. So, organisations and disability representative organisations like PWDA, we have plenty of guides and information, including we have a language guide that I know the ABC uses around how to talk about, work with, and discuss disability as a really great starting point. There is also companies that actually can directly support you with, especially if you're a small business owner, with actually creating a much more accessible and viable space step by step, recognizing that you can't do perfection straight off, but it's about the steps to get there that is important.
Megan Spindler-Smith, the Acting CEO of People with Disability Australia, thanks for your time today.
No problem. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You are on ABC Radio Queensland. And Brendan, of course, thank you very much to you for being with me. Let's head to a little song before we wrap up for today. Celebrate